Week 6 since we kicked this whole program off, and thanks as ever for all the support you put in over those weeks, whether it's as an original pioneer or someone who's joined a little bit later down the line. So we want to try and establish a weekly update with you guys if we can. Obviously, you'll appreciate everybody on this call is busy actually rolling Shelley out when they're not on this call, but we felt it was very useful to have this dialogue on a weekly basis. So we're going to try and do this going forward as much as possible, and we'll keep the format fairly simple today. Really, we want this to be a platform for you to ask questions rather than a platform for us to broadcast at you. But we thought we'd just sort of go through a few things which are maybe worth pointing out. So we'll start off with a roadmap update. So we've got Sava on the call, who is going to take us through that in a moment and take us through some of those key highlights, things we need to know. We've hit some milestones this week, which has been nice. One of them you'll definitely know about. A couple of them you might know about. We'll also give you a bit of an update about what's kind of coming most imminently down the line. So that's all the CLI wallet, some updates on the balance check, the Shelley testnet, and the mainnet candidate. And then when we've gone through those, it's an opportunity really just for you to give some feedback on anything that's particularly you want to talk about, how it's all going, particularly around the rollout. But we've also got Duncan on the call, and I know a few of you are quite interested in the progress of P2P. So Duncan is around to answer any questions and give you a bit of an update on that. And then, of course, anything else particularly that you want to talk about. So with no further ado, let me hand over to Sava. Here's the roadmap as it stands. Delighted to say that it's still all accurate, which is good. 6 weeks in and we're on track. But Sava, perhaps you just want to take us through a few of those key dates, and then maybe Duncan, you can jump in and tell us a bit more about the hard fork combinator, and maybe Kevin the balance check. So let's just maybe start, well, I guess from the wallet, Sava, which was really the highlight of the past week.
Okay, hi everybody. For you who don't know me so far, I'm Sava. I'm the product owner of Cardano. I'm trying to be responsible for these dates to be hit, and so far we are on a good track. So next week, even though you see a lot of blank space there, actually is the most exciting week for us. And to have that most exciting week, we had a great amount of work to do this week. So we have just finished one major sprint where we had a lot of things that are really crucial for Shelley. We have hard fork combinator, we have VRF implemented, we have Smash that is dealing with metadata of stakepool. Everything is slowly coming together. QA is working on it heavily, so far so good. Today we are wrapping up everything, and we will have the new version of the node 114. So that node has breaking changes. We will need to respin the network. So next week is going to be exciting and confusing at the same time, because we are going to have several testnets. The first one, probably the most important one, is the Shelley testnet, which is basically the continuation of current one. 113 is going to be killed eventually, and we will have 114 there probably Monday. So stakepool operators will be able to be onboarded on Monday, and afterwards we will be able to do some QA and release the Daedalus that's going to support that network. So from hopefully Wednesday, people will be able to download Daedalus and just delegate to your stakepool. That network is also going to be a playground for Shelley features only, which is not probably enough for everything that we do. That's why we need to spin up the mainnet candidate network, which basically starts from Byron and the history we have now on the mainnet, and we slowly do a test hard fork on that network. So we are basically simulating what we are expecting to have in 1 month. So it's not just one-off thing. We will have several mainnet candidates and several hard forks. So we go through the hard fork, we leave it be a little bit, then we kill it, and we do it over and over again. First, we're going to have small epochs like we do now. Then they're going to get longer and longer, and probably the last one will resemble the most on the mainnet, like 5 days epoch. That mainnet candidate network is pretty special. We will support Daedalus there also in one point of time, so it's going to be a completely new, different version of Daedalus than the one from the first one, Shelley testnet. It's just to have a feeling that everything works from user perspective well if you respin everything from Byron. So that's the exciting thing that starts from next week. First, we will have that Shelley testnet. Mainnet candidate is coming straight after that, maybe in parallel, and several iterations of mainnet candidates. After the next week, we are going to have another version of Daedalus with more features there that go beyond staking and delegation, with the countdown and the D factor that's changing and displaying in Daedalus and so on and so on. So those are the features that are not now essential for staking and delegation, but they are nice to have, and obviously we want to show how they work. That's what awaits us in the next 2 weeks. There is one important thing also. So we are going to do a balance check testnet, which is basically a once the version of Daedalus and which you will be using to check if your balance is okay compared to the snapshot. So whatever goes on today with ITN, we are doing the snapshot when rewards are running out. That snapshot is saved, and people will be able to see if their balances match up with that snapshot in the following week. If, I hope that we can say when the rewards are continuing, we will have another balance check. It's basically a test. It's not really anything more than a test, where we will do another snapshot during the July, and the final thing will be the rewards that are going to happen after the hard fork. So that's the thing that awaits us in the next week or two. Tim, you want to hand over to somebody else, or
questions? I mean, I guess it might be quite, but we can take a few questions in a moment. But just before we do, Duncan, the legendary hard fork combinator is something we've spoken about a little bit. Perhaps you just want to give people a little bit of a context and background as to what that is, if anyone's missed it, but also explain what you've been doing in the last week or so. I think we've had some positive progress on that, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. So, as everybody knows, we're doing this crazy terminology we inherit from Bitcoin of calling something a hard fork, when what we really mean is that we're smoothly moving from and deliberately moving from one protocol to another, such that we don't cause a fork in the network, right? So, I mean, really, it's all about avoiding a hard fork. But anyway, that's the kind of crazy terminology that Bitcoin gave us. So that's what we call it. So yeah, we're moving from, as we know, Byron to Shelley, and that means that we have a single chain with two, fairly substantially different protocols, sequentially composed one after the other. We run for, what is it, 2.5 years or whatever of the Byron era, and then switch into a new mode with going forward. So it's quite a substantial change to switch these protocols. It's not like a few tweaks here and there. Otherwise, we would have done it years ago. So we need to actually it's quite a difficult problem of how do you, in a principled way, such that principled so that it actually works, right, and it will resist corner cases, and you can test it, and you can have some degree of assurance that it won't go wrong. How do you do it in a principled way? Switch from one protocol to another protocol, and it turns out that's actually really a hard problem to do it properly. Proof of stake protocols, as you know, make use of time. You have to know what time it is to know whose turn is it, or what slot number is it. And it turns out that once you start doing hard forks and changing slot lengths and things like this, even knowing what slot number it is right now turns out to be a hard problem. Anyway, so composing these protocols in general is a hard problem, or even in specific cases is a hard problem. So we've been working on that for, we started thinking about it like 9-12 months ago, and we've been working on it. We've had a couple of people working on it really solidly for over the last 6 months or so. And we got really all of the infrastructure in place and merged a few weeks ago. And then we've been, for the general infrastructure, the ability to do hard forks at all, to do this protocol composition. And then we've been working on the Byron Shelley specific aspects of that, because there's certain bits that are special to Byron and Shelley. How do you translate the ledger state from one to the other, etc., things like that. Incorporate new there's a new Genesis file which is sort of merged in, right? There's the existing Byron state has to move across, but there's also new protocol parameters, and so you need a new Genesis file that kind of is grafted onto the side, if you like. Anyway, so that all that stuff has been merged into the consensus code, and then end of last week, this week, I've been working on updating the node top level code to make use of that new composite protocol that's available, and the moment of truth will come very shortly to run that and see that the top level integration works. All the difficult stuff has been done in the layers below, so we already have a fairly good degree of confidence from the automatic tests that we've written that run all of our consensus code in simulation. We're able to also run this new composite protocol in simulation as well. So we've got reasonably good assurance that the underlying code works. Yeah, what I've been working on is the top level plumbing and getting all the right information from the config files, and because we now need all the information from both Byron and Shelley, right? So now we need to be able to run a node where we say, here's the Byron Genesis file, and here's the Genesis file, the Shelley Genesis file. Here are your Byron signing keys, for nodes that create blocks, like our DevOps team. Obviously, their nodes, the federated nodes create blocks, but they have to be able to configure nodes that create blocks in the Byron era and then continue creating blocks in the Shelley era. So they have to be able to configure the node with both sets of signing keys. So anyway, there's a bunch of plumbing, and that's what we've been sorting out. And then, as you can imagine, the test setup is a bit more complicated because you need all of one and all of the other. Anyway, so that's what's currently in progress. We're expecting to get that running fairly shortly.
Great, thank you, Duncan. We've got a couple of questions here already. I'm not sure whether anyone on this team can answer those specifically. Kevin, are those questions you can take about the balance check, Yoroi, for one there?
Yeah, I think we can probably answer these. So we've been working with the Yoroi team I'm not sure whether. So what we're going to be doing is to take a snapshot of the UTXO going back a short period on the mainnet. So you'll be able to see the mainnet balance as well as the rewards balance. So provided Yoroi will accept that and doesn't require the full history, it's going to be compatible. That's what we did for the ITN. So it'll be essentially the same process that we had when we set up the balance check on the ITN. So I'm expecting it to work, yes. The second question you had was about non-seed phrase users. So will Daedalus be able to restore funds by private key? So this is a question about the wallets, right, as opposed to the addresses, because the rewards will be restored to a rewards address. That's going to be available in the node. There are things built into the node in the form of ledger rules to enable that. So they'll certainly be transferred. The question is, how do you unlock those? And will you be able to see them in Daedalus? I'm honestly not sure what the answer is to that particular question. Duncan, maybe you know.
Sorry, Kevin, I was distracted. Could you ask that question again?
Yeah, no, the question is about non-seed phrases and Daedalus. So will have support for non-seed phrase users?
I'm afraid that's a question you have to put to Darko. I'm afraid I'm not an expert in that area.
Okay, we can feed that. We can feed that into Darko. Someone has got a fair bit of background noise going on there, sort of a voice in the background. Maybe they can't help it. But if you can go on mute.
That was probably me. I'm sorry, my partner's having an animated conversation with her colleagues. So when you ask me questions, I'm afraid you'll get that background noise. But I'll shut up otherwise.
Fair enough. Thanks, Duncan. Okay. Please, any more questions from anybody while we're on this topic? We've shared the high-level roadmap. There's a lot more detail we can share, but please do send any questions our way, particularly anything you've found this week that you particularly wanted to kind of dig into and get a better understanding of.
So the transaction time on Daedalus is great, right? But the sync time isn't quite so good. Maybe Duncan can tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so this is one of the perils of us pushing out all this stuff so early, right? Is that one of the things that we tend to do last in the development process is various optimizations. I mean, we make sure that the overall design allows for the performance we want, but then the general approach is that you don't worry too much about the details of performance until you've got all your tests passing, and then you go back and look at the where you've been accidentally using something that's a bit inefficient, or you delay known optimizations until later. So we're in that phase now, right, where we've deployed on the testnet stuff that is predominantly functionally correct, but there's definitely a number of performance issues that we are aware of, and this isn't something that we're worrying about particularly. I mean, everyone's worrying about getting everything done in time, but we're not worrying about whether it's possible or not, right? We're not worried about whether we've made some fundamental architectural mistake. It's just we have to. There's a bunch of optimizations that we have to just do, and then we're fairly confident that we'll get within shooting distance of the buyer-in performance. There are some things that we would expect to be a bit slower in Preos. Preos is using more heavyweight crypto, so it won't be exactly the same performance as we had with BFT in the buyer-in era, but we will expect to get fairly similar in the end. And in particular, a couple of things coming up. We have some optimizations in the ledger coming along, and we have the final VRF implementation, which we're just about to integrate. We've got it merged into our lower level libraries, and we're about to get that merged. So that's the final crypto for Preos, and previously we've been using a mock VRF implementation, and that VRF is quite slow, so that's one of the things that's been making syncing slow, because that's the time at which you suddenly notice that you're trying to validate blocks flat out, and so that's when one notices that a few milliseconds here and there starts to add up when you're doing it flat out. I think that's all there's to say, unless there's more specific questions on performance.
Yes, one suggestion is why don't we just provide a database snapshot archive that people can sync from? I guess that kind of defeats the purpose of having a blockchain, right? That you can verify everything from scratch.
Yeah, I remember that. Oh, sorry.
Go on.
So yeah, you could provide an entire snapshot, but then you would have to provide a snapshot that had all the validation done, and then indeed, as Kevin says, you're kind of defeating the point. If you only provide the data and you still have to validate it, then actually it won't be any faster, because this is not network bound; it's CPU bound. That's what the optimizations are for. All the network stuff we resolved previously. The networking code is no different at all from what it was with the current mainnet. So yeah, the current code is where we've added the new Preos stuff and the new Shelley ledger stuff. Some of that is not. We haven't finished the optimizations, and so yeah, that is just CPU wise slow, but it's not a network issue. So providing a snapshot wouldn't make it any faster, unless you provided the entire pre-validated ledger snapshot, in which case, yeah, you're not really running a blockchain anymore.
Yes, are we planning to do any load testing, benchmarking on the testnet? Alexei's asking. So we'll certainly be doing various types. We're doing a lot of load testing in the background at the moment. I know that some people have already tried some load tests on the testnet, and we're aware that until we've brought in these performance improvements, you could probably overload it with relatively few transactions. The TX span we saw today was an example of that. Once we're confident in the optimization, then yes, we'll say to you, let rip, see what you can do. But I don't think we're quite at that stage yet.
Yes, I think that's right. I mean, if you look at what we have with our current Byron mainnet, you know, our internal benchmarks, you know, we can hit like 100 TPS or something, and we can do that consistently, and it doesn't suffer any slowdowns, and it doesn't, you know, you can't overload it by, you can't like try to hit it with more than 100 TPS and cause it to fall over. It just reduces the rate at which it'll accept new transactions. So, you know, the existing thing we have, the existing, you know, mainnet and Byron code is very stable as far as that kind of performance stuff is concerned, and I'm fairly confident that we will be able to get the Shelley ledger code up to that same level of, or you know, roughly close to that same level of performance. But it's not there yet, and indeed, as Kevin says, you know, if you spam the network right now, you'll make it slow. Yeah, that is expected right now.
So what Martin is asking is about simple CLI queries to get the total rewards before fees, as in the JCLI. So this is a kind of design question. There's a huge amount of things you can put into the CLI for the node, right? And the question is how much we should put in that, how much is loading up the node, and how much you should be getting from tools like the DB-Sync database. So I think to some extent you're asking us for a lot of these things because the DB-Sync maybe isn't quite fully up and running yet. Would you like to comment on that, Duncan?
No, I think that summarizes it okay.
Yeah. So we've got a lot of open tickets. We'll look through them and we'll prioritize these. Initially, getting the base functionality working has been more important than providing query information. And if we can avoid duplicating queries, we would prefer to do that. So this is particularly the case for historic information. We shouldn't be providing any historic information from the node. We should only be providing live information, of course.
And with the release that we're doing this week, DB-Sync should be fully compatible now, so you can get pool information, you can get metadata information. So hopefully people can stop depending on the massive ledger state dump for their own tooling and can use DB-Sync as the database going forward next week.
Yes, I think that's right. The thing to realize, indeed, as Kevin said and Sam said, is that the node CLI and indeed the node itself, the node is not trying to be an explorer. The node is really specialized to doing what the node needs to do. Its job is already sufficiently complicated that we wouldn't want to chuck in, you know, explorer-like REST APIs and whatever into there. So the node just has these very minimal, you know, it keeps only the information it really needs to validate the chain, and then everything else is then delegated to tools like the explorer. So yeah, the node CLI has a little bit of query capability, but it's only querying what the node is itself keeping for the node's own purposes, which is not, you know, is not everything. And that's what the explorer is for, the explorer database.
Thanks. So Nick Depp has a question about whether we'll be able to store Ada and Daedalus with seed and have CLI functionality needed for running a pool. So I'm not quite sure I understand the question, Nick. Maybe you'd like to elaborate that. What are you trying to do? So you can certainly store Ada and Daedalus, and you'll be able to use that Ada for running a pool using the node CLI, normal node CLI functionality. What are you specifically asking for?
So let's see, Nick has written on the chat, get away the secret key rather than have seed or secret key. I'm not quite sure how to decipher that. One thing that I think will be useful for people, for stakepool operators and stakepool owners in particular, is remember there's this possibility to have multiple owners of a pool, and that way you can you know, get more people together to put together the pledge that you need to make a competitive pool. So it will be useful to have people who are maybe less, you know, who are not themselves using the CLI, are using Daedalus, and have them be able to be a pool owner and contribute their pledge towards the pool. So it will be very useful to be able to. So this is a feature that isn't available yet, but I think it's something that we intend to do at some stage, is to make it possible via the wallet backend to sign a pool registration certificate and produce a witness for that, so that then as an operator you can tell various people use the wallet CLI to sign this with your stake key for your Daedalus wallet, send me that back the witness, and then you as the operator can assemble those witnesses and submit the transaction. This goes along with the feature request about be able to sign a pool registration certificate in multiple stages. That's not a feature that we're doing specifically for pools. It's a feature that is actually general for all transactions, that you can produce a signature or a witness for a transaction as a standalone thing, and then you can assemble a signed transaction by just collecting the set of witnesses. So that's what you need for multisig, and it's what you need for when you've got separate owners and operators.
And that's high priority for the upcoming sprint, right?
The multisig, yes, yeah. In CLI, yes. But the feature for a wallet backend to sign a transaction like that with a separate witness, that we need to do a little bit more thinking about. That's not currently planned in a specific sprint.
So Marcel and Carl have very similar questions, both about the next version of the node. So 1.14.0 is in the process of being tagged right now, Duncan?
That's what I would be doing if I were not talking to you guys. Yeah.
Right, so we'll let you go quickly after this. So 1.14.0 is being tagged, lots of cool improvements, but we are going to need to respin the network to use that. So the current plan we're discussing with Sam was to respin that early next week, probably Tuesday. Carl, you will need to use version 1.14.0 for your node from that point onwards. And one thing that I'm advised by Sam is that we do actually have static builds now of the node, and all I have to do is figure out where they're hiding, and we can pass them on to you.
So there was a follow-up from Martin about please include a stake key export feature in Daedalus. Just because that was what we were just talking about a second ago. Interestingly, it may actually not be the case that we do it by exporting a key from Daedalus, but rather we do it, as I suggested, by having Daedalus, or rather the wallet backend through its API and CLI, produce a standalone witness on a transaction that registers a stake pool. Why do that way around rather than export a key? Well, it actually is to do with the cryptography. The HD derivation, the way that the HD derivation works with ED25519 keys is such that the format of key that you need for HD derivation is not actually exactly the same as a simple ED25519 key, which one uses in a kind of very simple standalone key pair scenario. So the wallet CLI, the node CLI only deals with isolated key pairs, normal ED25519. Whereas when you do HD derivation, you need a slight variation on that scheme, which has bigger keys. So we don't really want to add HD derivation and all that kind of fancy stuff into the node CLI, because the node CLI is supposed to be very simple and just deal with simple things. So we'll probably do it the other way around and have the wallet produce a signature, and then you assemble the signatures, rather than exporting the key from Daedalus to the node CLI, because the node CLI otherwise won't understand that kind of key because it doesn't support the HD keys, and we don't really want to have the wallet, the node CLI deal with HD keys. That's really a wallet feature. So you did ask. That's the the technical explanation.
So maybe I'll answer Michael's question next, which is about validation does it benefit more from higher core counts or higher clocked cores? And of course, the faster the processor using, the faster the validation is going to be. So you'll always get faster validation by upping your clock speed for the same architecture, or by using a faster processor from a different architecture. Probably also by improving your memory up to the limits of the system that you're using. Then the question is, are we exploiting multi-core? So do we have any multi-core support at the moment in the validation? So Duncan, where are we with that?
Sure. So we use, sorry, wait for the echo to go. So we do use concurrency in the node, and you'll notice that if you do a bulk sync on the current mainnet, you'll see with the default configuration that it will peg 2 cores at 100%. And the reason for that is because the runtime system parameters that we built in by default says use 2 cores, and so that's what it does. And we do get a fairly significant speed up from going from 1 core to 2 cores. You can, if you like, override it and go up to 4, but there are diminishing returns quite quickly. It does not scale all that well. And that's not surprising, because we have not really yet focused on that kind of performance optimization. So there are opportunities for doing more stuff in parallel, which we have not yet taken. I mean, for example, you could take all of the transactions in a batch of blocks and validate those in parallel, validate the signatures in parallel, and we don't do that yet. And we know that we could do, but you know, this is one of those things. It's like, do you want to get Shelley out, or do you want to make downloading like twice as fast? Everybody wants Shelley out, so I would love to get to those optimizations, and I think in the fullness of time we will do. But we don't have those kinds of things yet. So you'll notice that, yeah, we are able to take advantage of some parallelism, because when you're downloading and validating from multiple peers, and there's multiple stages to these things, there's a degree of pipelining, there is some amount of parallel work. And so, yeah, you'll see that we do get 2 cores, and we get a good speed up from that. But when you move to 4, it goes, I think maybe, you're doubling the cores, and you're getting maybe 20, 40, 50% faster or something. It's nowhere near like doubling again.
One place we will be taking advantage of multi-processing will be on epoch boundaries. So at that point, the DB sync process can run in the background without interrupting the nodes. If you have a core to dedicate to DB sync, it will get on with its job without slowing the node down at the epoch boundary, because we're able to take advantage of immutable state in the ledger. So that's a nice thing we can do using the Haskell node. And one of the other things to add there is we've had discussions, Duncan, Jared, and I, about whether you could actually jump ahead a bit in the processing to take advantage of multiple cores, basically by doing a bit of work ahead of time, possibly work you need, but possibly speculative work. So that's something we might be able to take advantage of in the future.
We've certainly given ourselves the opportunity to do this, because when we designed the Shelley ledger rules, we were very careful to pay attention to the data dependencies within those ledger rules. And fundamentally, parallelism is all about data dependencies. And if you have your data dependencies set up in a sort of parallel way, rather than a serially dependent data dependencies, then you have an opportunity for parallelism. That doesn't mean you automatically use it, but it means that at least we have the opportunity to take advantage of, we can, without changing the Shelley design, without changing compatibility, we can start to take advantage of parallelism in our implementation of the Shelley rules, which, if we'd designed the rules in a different way, we wouldn't be able to do. So I think we've set ourselves up fairly well to be able to take advantage of parallelism. And I think it is worth doing, because it is CPU bound at the moment, and I think it's likely to remain CPU bound. We can saturate network links really without much difficulty. But it's I mean, our profiling at the moment is certainly telling us that that it's CPU bound.
Yeah, so especially as the hardware manufacturers are moving towards increasing number of cores. So we're seeing, we were stuck on 2 or 4 cores, but we're seeing trends towards 18 cores in what are essentially standard workstations. So
it would certainly make syncing on my Raspberry Pi quicker, my Raspberry Pi 4, than I'd be able to use all 4 cores. At the moment, I can only use 1, and then it takes 12 hours to sync.
Duncan, there is a risk in Jira that says don't mention the Raspberry Pi.
Yes. Don't mention the Raspberry Pis. No, that's right. They're good fun. Have luck. That's the level of support we're providing for Raspberry Pi. I've got one. It's good fun, but I don't think I'd recommend running a stakepool on one just yet.
Yeah, and you would at least need more memory, but also the architecture we have some issues with at the moment.
Yeah. For example, we can only run on 1 core. There's a good example. There's some issues with the synchronization primitives in the runtime system on ARM devices.
So I think we've covered Regis' question about dbsync Shelley version. So we're in the process of working on dbsync. Most of the features will be available very soon. There are already some features available. It's a high priority for us. Expect that to be rolled out in stages. And then GraphQL needs to work with that. So essentially, there's a chain dependency here. We have to get the dbsync working, then we can get the GraphQL working. So it's all in the pipeline, and we'll release it as quickly as we can.
So talking about things in the pipeline, I know that there have been a few conversations and questions about P2P over the past couple of weeks. Duncan, before we let you get back to some tagging, perhaps just want to give us a few words on where we are with P2P and what we're thinking there.
Sure. Let's see. We don't have Marston on the call, do we? Otherwise, I could give him some opportunity to explain a few things. Let's see. I don't think he is he? No. Okay. All right. I'll
He's writing a blog. There's going to be a blog.
Yes, he's been working on a blog.
So,
I think the sort of most important thing to say is that we're working on it, but it's not the most important thing. And that may sound like a harsh thing to say, but you have to prioritize some things over others. And the most important thing for us at the moment is to get Shelley out soon and for it to be stable. And so it's actually a very sensible idea to not deploy peer-to-peer at the same time, because I'm not here to badmouth the ITN, but we did everything at once there, and one of the effects that we found was that when you deploy everything all at once, all in one big bang, and you try to do it very quickly, there's things that don't work, and that's kind of expected, and that's totally okay on a test network, but that's not okay when we come to the mainnet. So that's why we're taking, sorry about the background noise. So that's why we're taking a slightly different approach there, and we're staging the rollout of these things. So we're starting with a federated network, and or sort of manually configured network, which means IOHK takes responsibility for running the relays that all the Daedalus users use, and we take responsibility for providing enough relays to provide connectivity between the stakepool operators. But we completely encourage you guys as stakepool operators to also make your own pairing arrangements and to do all the things that you've already been doing, self-organizing and arranging, an ad hoc constructed peer-to-peer arrangements. That's great. And even once we do have more automated peer-to-peer stuff, it's still actually completely reasonable and sensible to have some manual pairing arrangements as well. It's not an unreasonable thing. So we're doing this sort of stage approach where we will start with this federated and sort of manually configured topology, and then after the Shelley mainnet, we will start to roll out the ability to turn on more automation, and then we'll do a gradual migration. So it'll be a completely smooth thing, so that if we run into any problems, we just dial it back down. In the same way that we're doing this with the with the decentralization of the block production in Shelley, is that when the Shelley hard fork first happens, all the blocks are still, the instant after the hard fork, all the blocks are still produced by, the BFT nodes operated by IOHK and Emergo and the CF. And then we gradually, change this D parameter and, gradually over the course of weeks and months, as people migrate their funds to addresses that can delegate, then we move more and more of the slots being produced by the stake pools. So it's the same, principle, same philosophy, that we don't want to do things in a big bang way. We want to do them slowly, carefully, in a controlled way. And that's the same with peer-to-peer. Now, as for the specifics of what we're doing, the the first thing that we are going to integrate is what we call the peer-to-peer governor. So this provides the mechanism that we will ultimately use for the peer-to-peer system. And we already have the peer-to-peer governor running in tests in a simulated environment where it can do gossip, but we're not initially going to deploy it with the ability to actually do gossip, which is what you need for the full peer-to-peer in the end. But we will nevertheless integrate the peer-to-peer governor as soon as it's ready, which may be before the mainnet hard fork, it may be after. We'll do it when it's ready. We don't want to do it before it's ready, obviously. And what will the peer-to-peer governor give you, even when we aren't doing gossip? It gives you a bit more control. It gives you better some better error handling. It gives better policies, the ability to configure policies. In particular, it will give us the ability to do this thing that I've talked about, I think, on some of these calls previously, of being able to use a single TCP connection in both directions, so that you can make an outbound, connection through a firewall from a core node to a relay, and be able to use that in both directions, so that you don't have to make lots of firewall configurations. You can just use a default policy of deny all incoming connections and make only outgoing connections from your core nodes to relays. So it will enable that kind of thing. It will also enable us, once we have the right policies in place, to be able to use the relays that you guys register on the chain. So you know that when one of the CLI features that's coming along in the upcoming release is the ability to not only specify your pool metadata, tickers and all that kind of stuff, but also to be able to specify in the command line when you make your pool registration certificate, to register the IP addresses or DNS names or SRV DNS entries of your relays. And so that means that the relays are then available on chain, and the peer-to-peer governor will be able to make use of that, so that we can start to add a bit more automation. Even before we've got gossiping, we can start to add a bit more automation for knowing all the relays that belong to all the stake pools. I think I'll leave it there. I've probably given enough detail. If people have more specific questions, I'm happy to help you elaborate.
Duncan, thanks. And as Kevin said, Marcel's actually written a blog piece, a technical blog piece, which we'll be publishing in the next week or two, I imagine, which gives a little bit more detail about some of the technicalities. Thanks, Duncan. We've got a few more questions there, Kevin.
Yeah, I'll go through some. So I know Federico is asking about the KNA 0 parameters and when are they going to be revealed? And I noticed that Jer was on the call. So Jer, what am I allowed to say? If he doesn't answer, maybe I should take that as carte blanche.
I think so. Normally means no, doesn't it?
That probably means no.
What was the question, Kevin? Is that for me?
The question, Jer, is about the KNA 0 parameters and the timing. When are we going to release details about them? So we're working on these at the moment, Federico. We've got I've been doing this week a lot of simulations to back up the values that we've been considering to guide the final choice. And I would expect them to be announced very soon. But Joe, you probably have the best information about when we might be telling people what KNA 0 would be.
I think we can't reveal them today, but we're getting close to actually a point where we can. But I would say, as I said, not this week, but in the near future. But I haven't got an exact date when it's going to be there. But as you pointed out, we've engaged with the community and got feedback on that, and I think we are getting close to being able to announce those dates, but not today.
Yeah, so we've been looking at a lot of different things in determining these parameters. We don't want to take a rushed decision. Of course, what we're really discussing is what the initial values should be. So it's important when we set the initial values that we set them up in a way that's going to allow the network to become established, rather than saying, okay, here's where we want to be in a year's time, 2 years' time. So you can expect the parameters to evolve over time. It won't be that we say, okay, here they are, good luck. It will be, here they are, we'll keep an eye on these parameters. We'll make sure that the system grows up organically, establishes itself over a period of time. Okay, so
Kevin, if I may add, so the thing that's going to happen next week is a blog piece where we will elaborate how we got the numbers, and it will be supported by simulations that you have done, and that's a draft proposal. We are putting it up for all of you to pitch in with input. That's not the final proposal. Based on your feedback and based on the things we have simulated on ITN and on Shelley testnet now, we hope it will be the final parameters will be close to the proposal. So we are working on this together with all of you. We are waiting for feedback. It's not just something, here it is, it's number one, and deal with it. We want constructive debate if that is a good value and why not. So it's a draft proposal first, then we go out with a strategy, how K parameter will evolve every month, for example, and so on and so on. So some things will not be fixed forever, they will evolve, and we are also proposing a strategy for evolution of those parameters. Is that fine?
Do we want to mention SIPs?
Yeah, we can, but before that, I would like Kevin to elaborate about the SMASH procedure that we are going to have from next week. It's going to be a slightly different experience than what we had so far, so maybe it's good to warn them about the innovation there.
Yeah. So Smash is the metadata aggregation server, and what it is essentially a mechanism for recording your pools, your pool metadata into a list. So what we will be doing initially there is we're not able to scrape the data off chain yet. That will be coming very soon. Initially, what we were doing is to provide a slightly manual procedure where you'll have to give us a little bit more information in the same way that you've been doing with the topology information, and we will then make sure that's entered into the database, and it will be available through the wallet interfaces to the Daedalus or other users. So that will be so the information about the pools will be agglomerated into the Smash database that will then be served off to the wallet interfaces, and then there will be a mechanism that will allow delegators to take sensible choices over pool delegation.
But you should still register that metadata. So basically you have a metadata URL, so you'll need to have a web server or just somewhere that has your metadata on it. And you should still register that URL and hash on chain, because as soon as we have the Smash DB sync stuff integrated, we're going to start ignoring the stuff in the repo that we have on Cardano Ops that goes along with the relays as well. If we have the relays support in 1.14, you should also register your relays on chain, so they will be integrated into our topology going forward after we stop utilizing the manual pull request method.
So we're working on a set of guidelines at the moment that covers all of that. And if you follow the guidelines, the same metadata should be registered on chain and in the data in our database. So you shouldn't have any problems with that.
Duncan, you want to go over the SIP?
I was just going to add to what you said, Sava, about the protocol parameters. Is that we intend to publish the initial protocol parameters in a SIP, and the SIP process is designed to invite feedback. Now that doesn't mean that that SIP will be done and dusted before the mainnet hard fork, but these protocol parameters don't have to be absolutely final, right? So there's some, as long as we get them in sort of roughly the right order of magnitude, based on feedback and analysis at this stage, most of these protocol parameters are actually updatable. So we could have a more formal process of feedback through the CIP process. That was all I wanted to say about that.
Great, thanks, Duncan. So I skipped over one question from Alexei, which was slightly off topic. what would we particularly like to see tested through a putatively extended ITN? I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, well, one of the things I would like to see is, I noticed there was an option for voting there, and I quite would like to see how that worked. Does anyone else have any ideas for what testing we would like from a future ITN if it was extended? We've got a lot of information from what we've seen so far. So we've had a tremendous amount of value from the ITN, and all of that's fed in to the parameter settings, all kinds of other things that we've been discussing, commercial parameters, etc. So it's been incredibly valuable to us up to now. At this stage, of course, most of those things are reasonably well defined. So it would have to be something new that was particularly interesting to us. Voting is one of those things. Yes, as Codex data says, governance issues or procedures, and that's something which is obvious. Yeah. Great. Any final questions? Carl from Adrestia. Okay, so
we've got Alex on the call actually, so maybe Alex Appledorn, you want to take that one?
All right, Alex should answer that.
Sorry, give me a second. I didn't read the question yet. I personally want to explore Adrestia. How advisable is it to test that right now, to do the wallet integration, etc.? Would I be wasting my time? No, actually. I believe that the upcoming release with the node, Adrestia will also be making some releases. I would be very happy if you guys would be testing the upcoming releases and give us feedback in any way, shape, or form. We will definitely be building on top of what we will be releasing in the upcoming release.
Yeah, so we haven't yet got the Adrestia interface to Shelley, Alex, is that right? We're working on that, so it will be soon rather than now.
Yeah, no, correct. So in the upcoming release, we will be adding features and functionalities associated with Shelley, which can be tested.
Great. Thank you, Alex. Any other questions for Alex? You want to tell us something about any exciting developments coming from the Adrestia team?
Everything with you is exciting. But let me see. I don't know if everybody in this group, this comment is here. So we'll be this is adding. Okay, yeah, we'll be adding additional documentation and information on the Adrestia guide relatively quickly. Obviously, the repos and the CLI tools will have extensive help documentation. So it should be relatively straightforward to navigate through the wallet CLI. The exact releases will obviously be announced on the day itself. But yeah, I can assure you that there's quite a number of interesting features coming up.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Alex. You sounded a bit like a politician then.
Well, I mean, there's enough exciting stuff happening there to just say, like, yeah, have a look at it, but I'm not telling you what it is yet. Just go have a look.
Okay, I think unless maybe two more questions have come in. No, I think they're good.
Yeah, next question to Duncan from Marcus.
Is Duncan still on?
About the update. You still here, Duncan? Yeah, he's answered.
I'm still here. Yes, I was just answering his question on the text. I mean, I think basically you could do what you like. I mean, the question is really about, should we have topology update services. Don't invest too much effort, because we will get in this peer-to-peer governor stuff in the not too distant future. So it's not worth investing a huge amount of time. But if there are things that you would like to do in the short term that are not too much of a time sink for you, I think use your own creativity. You can use manual, semi-manual, whatever you think is sensible, and talk to the other people running pools. Talk to Sam.
Well, talk to us. Yeah, I was going to say, do feed those through, Marcus. We'd love to see what
Marcus says it's already done, so Marcus is very efficient.
Perfect. That's the best kind of work that's already done.
Fantastic.
Marcus had a specific question actually,
okay.
which was about the issue about having to use same port numbers. And actually, one of the things to note there is that we, in the long term, we're not going to be requiring that all pools use a specific, or all relays use a specific port number, because when you register your relay on the chain, you'll be able to either use like an IP address or an A or AAAA, IPv6 name, a record with a port number when you register on the chain. Or interestingly, if you're into that kind of thing, you can use DNS SRV records, which then allow different the port numbers to be specified in the DNS entries. So that's our current plan for the how we will discover the root set of peers in the peer-to-peer network, i.e. the relays run by the stakepool operators. And hopefully that will be sufficiently configurable. That's it.
That's actually a good point to end on. Look, I mean, thank you guys so much for joining our call again today. I hope this has been helpful. I hope there aren't a few less burning questions, although, as you know, this is still a moving feast, still a moving target. A lot more to go, but really positive progress so far. I think we're hitting our goals and our targets, still moving forward positively. And obviously, we couldn't have done any of this without you, and particularly for all the contribution you made over the last 6 weeks in particular. Thank you to everybody from IOHK and the guys from the CF for helping behind the scenes, and of course to everybody here. So we'll see you all soon. Thanks a lot, guys. Cheers.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, folks. Thanks for all the great questions.